We all know what the Ten Commandments are. We've all read them. Some of us had them on the walls of our house and so forth. But what is the most common command in the Bible? Perhaps it would be to be more loving. Maybe. No, that's not it. How about for God's desire that we perhaps have more humility? Because pride quite often is spoken of as a problem. So humility, I think, is that the opposite of pride? Who's a teacher? Somebody's got to be a teacher in here.
Well, I'm not paid to do it, but I teach.
Okay. Pride, humility, opposites, basically? I would say kind of almost part way. How about that we maintain or guard against theft or perhaps murder or... all these commands are in the Bible, but what would be probably the most common command that Jesus spoke when he, what? Love your neighbor? That's a good one. I think, though, you'll find that the one that is probably the most common was 2 words. Fear not. Pastor, you caught it. Don't be afraid. Be strong. Be courageous. You can trust in me. Fear not. Why does God command us not to fear? I mean, it's not a super special vice. Is it listed among the 7 most deadly sins? No. Do we disfellowship? Do we censure people for fear? No. So why is fear such an important factor in our lives?
Shows lack of trust.
Okay. I think that one of the main reasons that God says fear not so much is that He wants us to be spared emotional discomfort. However, so many times when God tells us not to fear, He's leading us into something that we are more afraid of than we would have been before. So it's kind of a strange setup, I would say. But I think God says fear not so often because fear is the number one reason humans are tempted to avoid doing what God asks them to do. I have been giving this series of sermons on getting out of the boat when Peter got out of the boat. And I think that's one of the main reasons people don't get out of their boat. Fear not, one writer says, has been put in there 366 times in the Bible. That's one for every day of the year, including leap year. So fear not is something that was used. A 2-year-old girl stands at the edge of the pool. Her dad is down in the pool, and he's saying, jump. Don't be afraid, jump. I will help you. I will keep you from having problems. But in her mind, she is fighting with this problem. She has an inner conflict going on. On one hand, everything is screaming at her to stay put. Because the water's deep, the water's cold, the water is dangerous. And she's never done this before. After all, she can't swim. What if something went wrong? I mean, bad things can happen. And most importantly, it's her body that's at stake here. On the other hand, it's her daddy in the water. He's been pretty good to her for all her life these last 2 years. He's big, he's strong, and he really seems quite confident about the outcome. But her battle is between fear and trust. Trust says, jump. Fear says, no, I can't do this. But she cannot stand on the side of that pool forever. Eventually, she has to make a decision. And she has more than her fears or her confidence. Because inside there's that tiny spark of will. That little spark that determines her destiny. Will she jump? Or will she back away? Whichever way that little girl chooses will lead to a significant consequence. Try saying that fast 5 times. If she chooses to jump, she will become a little more confident in her dad's ability to catch her, in her ability to face that fear, and she's more likely to jump the next time this is put before her. The water will hold less terror for her. Ultimately, she will see herself as the kind of person who will not be held back by fear. However, if she decides not to jump, she will also have consequences. She will lose the opportunity. She will lose the opportunity to discover that her father can be trusted. She will perceive herself as the kind of person who does not respond bravely to challenges. She will work harder to avoid getting into them situations. I would say that there is a place for fear in our lives, but I would want trust to be stronger. I never want the no of fear to overpower the yes of faith. Fear makes a couple of appearances in the story of Peter getting out of the boat. Number one, if you want to look at it, in Matthew 14, starting with verse about 26, 27 in there. They see Jesus, the disciples, remember, in this boat. And as I've said before, I don't know how big this boat was. It had to hold 14 people, 13, 14, somewhere in there. So it had to be a pretty good-sized boat. And they're in the middle of a storm. And I imagine they're bailing water out and trying to keep the boat upright and everything. And they see this apparition walking towards them on the water. It's Jesus, but they don't realize it's Jesus. They think it's a ghost. and they are afraid. What does it say? That they saw the ghost and they were afraid. Jesus says, it's me, don't be afraid. Peter says, if it's truly you, tell me to come to you on the water. Now, I don't think the water got firm under Peter's feet for a few moments. I think he's hanging on to the side of that boat, and his feet are in the water, and it must have been quite a sight. But his fear is telling him, hang on, do not turn loose. You're at least going to be on somewhere near the top of the water hanging onto the boat. But Jesus has said, come. Peter jumped. He turned loose of the boat. And the water was firm under his feet. And he started walking toward Jesus. Everything for a little while went very smoothly. Then fear struck again. He saw the wind. And this led to the next phase. He became very frightened. His response to the wind and the storm was to give into fear. And he started to sink. Father, save me. And Jesus said, fear not. But so many times, we as people, as human beings, have a problem with fear. A middle-aged man perhaps wants to change what he's doing for his life, wants to step out in faith because he believes God is calling him to do something special. And that fear keeps him from taking that step. Perhaps a long-time Christian has been thinking that things have been going so well. And we all know the phrase, waiting for the other shoe to drop. Something's got to happen. Or perhaps a young person is following a course that their parents would prefer that they took in their life. And they're not enthused about it at all, and perhaps they would prefer to do something different, but fear keeps them from saying anything. Have you ever known people that were willing to risk almost everything? My boss, I don't know, has risked his home more than once for a business venture. It didn't work one time, so let's do it again another time. People, I have an admiration for people that are willing to do that. I said I could never do that because I have that fear. I guess if I was the 2-year-old boy standing there, I would have backed away. Fear is a tremendous thing. Trust and fear have been battling each other for the human heart, yours and mine. Eventually, one or the other will win. Where is Jesus calling you to jump to him with reckless abandon? What's keeping you in that boat? I would suspect it's fear. What is fear? At its simplest and most benign form, fear is an integral warning cry that danger is nearby and we'd better do something about it. Designed to be what researchers call a self-correcting mechanism. Our bodies, creates our bodies, makes them ready for flee, hide, or fight. So there's a big psychological deal about it and so forth. But when fear is triggered in us, we respond. Our body goes into action. And I know when we're driving along, sometimes I'll reach over and slap the seat beside me or in between somebody sitting beside me or whatever, and it startles them and makes their eyes open wide and makes them say things that sometimes they call me names, like, "Why'd you do that, bozo?" or something like that. But it's fear. Suddenly, I mean, it has a reaction in our body. It says quick energy hormones like adrenaline get pumped into muscles in the bloodstream. Blood drains from the skin's surface, which produces the paleness of fear, gets diverted into large muscles like legs for a quick getaway. Heart pounds. I mean, it's the whole body. How wonderfully are we made? How wonderfully. But there's a good fear. The fear of a child learning that do not put your hand on the hot stove. Do not walk out in the traffic. Sometimes we have to put that fear in that child. If fear only happened when it was truly needed, when you were about to be struck by a truck or chased by a homicidal maniac, it would be nothing to worry about. The problem is that for most of us, fear strikes when it is neither helpful nor wanted. When fear enters us and decides to live in us, we become worriers. Worriers. That's hard for me to say. Worriers. We worry about everything. And the thing of it is, fear is something that happens outside. Worry is something that happens inside. Yet they produce the same physical responses. Worry is fear that is unpacked and moved in and doesn't leave until it is evicted. But the very gift, that gift of imagination that we have, is the thing that makes it so possible. Over and over in the Bible, it is fear that threatens to keep people from trusting and obeying God. When that little girl stands on the side of the pool, she is usually well aware of the price she's going to pay by jumping in. But she and you and I are often less aware of the price that is to be paid for refusing to jump. American Psychological Association put a bunch of stuff there, but that's all right. All research suggests that self-esteem largely boils down to one issue. When you face a difficult situation, do you approach it, take action, and face it head on, or do you avoid it, wimp out, and run and hide? There's something about embracing a challenge that is important for inner well-being. I'm going to move over here. Fear and hiding go together very well. When we're afraid of something that happens in the church, do we hide it in ourselves? Do we say something about it? Kids and I used to play a game many years ago. See who could be quietest the longest. Ever do that? We were doing that in the Sierra Vista Church when we were cleaning over there for a period of time, and I could almost get a nap. But When we hide things, because of things that are said, we hide it in ourselves. Sometimes we fail to speak out when we know that something is wrong. But hiding and fear have been with us from the very beginning. In Genesis chapter 3, I think that's where it is. Genesis chapter 3, starting with verse 6. So when the woman saw that the tree was good for food, that it was pleasant to the eyes, and a tree desirable to make one wise, she took of its fruit and ate. She also gave to her husband with her, and he ate. Then the eyes of both of them were opened, and they knew they were naked. And they sewed fig leaves together and made themselves coverings. And they heard the sound of the Lord walking in the garden in the cool of the evening, or cool of the day. And Adam and his wife hid themselves from the presence of the Lord God among the trees of the garden. Then the Lord called to Abraham and said, "Where are you?" So he said, "I heard your voice in the garden, and I was afraid because I was naked, and I hid myself." "Where are you, Adam?" "I heard you in the garden, and I was afraid. Because I was naked, I hid." And we've been hiding ever since. Been hiding ever since behind smiles that we don't feel. We listen to people say words that we don't associate with, and we don't say anything. Fear always lies behind the quiet game in church. Fear whispers to us that God is not really big enough to take care of us. It tells us that we're not really safe in His hands. It causes us to distort the way we think about Jesus. But friends, there is no limit to His presence. There's nowhere we can go, no activity we can engage in where He is not watching over us. When you pass through the water, I will be with you. But fear of what we might do, fear of what perhaps He's asking us to do, tries to convince us that He's not there with us, that He's limited, He's not finite. He's only partially present with us, and he's only a semi-competent God. That's what fear does to us. Fear has created more practicing heretics than theology ever has. I should say more than bad theology ever has. You will never know God is trustworthy if you don't risk obeying Him. When you come to the end of your life, all those what-ifs become might-have-beens. What might have been if I had trusted God? If you give in to a mindset of fear and find yourself one day at the end of your life, filling the last days, sitting in an easy chair in front of the television, the thought will come, what might have been if I had only trusted God? What might I have done? What might I have become? It's a price too high to pay. But you see, on the other hand, fear is not the only thing that spreads. So does trust. Daring trust is contagious as well. Some time ago, a man took his then 10-year-old son to a lake, big lake, deep lake. And they were going to do, or he was going to have his son do some parasailing. Well, you had a choice. You go behind the boat, up 400 feet, up 600 feet, or up 800 feet. Well, there was difference in price between this one down here at the 400 and this one up here at the 800. And the 600 was also different. But the dad was kind of leaning towards, how about the 400-foot level, you know? I mean, that's up there quite a ways. You don't want to fall from that anyhow. But that's up there quite a ways. And the son said, you know, I think I would like to go to the 800-foot level. He says, I'm going to be scared for a little bit. But he says, I'll be there. And it'll only last a little while. But it'll be with me for the rest of my life. It will be with me for the rest of my life. I'll have it forever. And I think if God had anything to say right now, He would probably point us to Psalms 103, verses 15 and 16. As for mortals, their days are like grass. They flourish like a flower in a field, for the wind passes over it, and it's gone. And its place knows it no more. You see, in the vast eternal scheme of things, our lives are briefer than we could possibly imagine. Whatever you do in faith, every time you trust me, whenever you ask in risky obedience and jump in response to my invitation, that you will have forever. So like Peter, he asked, Jesus said, come. Peter jumped. He turned loose of the boat. We have that same opportunity. How many of us are willing to jump? Our closing hymn is number 516, 516.
Can I doubt His tender mercy?
that as we face things, Father, that you may give us the strength to overcome that fear. If you call us, Lord, may we jump. May we go to you for our strength. So guide us in every way, Lord, is our prayer in Jesus' name. Amen.